Recently, Funimation started screaming the Goblin Slayer movie on their website for a limited time, and I decided to give it a shot. Today I'll be giving you guys my quick thoughts on Goblin Slayer Goblin's Crown. Before I get into this review, I must mention that I've never watched the Goblin Slayer series, so this review is coming from an outsider's perspective. That said, I've heard of Goblin Slayer before learning about this movie, and I've seen it advertised on multiple websites throughout the years. It was just one of those fantasy series that didn't look too appealing to me personally. Like with a lot of these fantasy anime, the Goblin Slayer series is an adaptation of some light novels by Kumo Kagyu. Goblin's Crown is an adaptation of the fifth light novel, so it's an actual canon story, which usually isn't the case with a lot of these anime movies. The movie and series was animated by White Fox Studio, the same studio that brought us Cautious Hero, Steins Gate, and ReZero. As someone new to the series, I can confirm that you don't need to watch the show to enjoy and understand the movie. Around 25 minutes of the movie's 75-minute runtime is spent recapping the events of the series and getting you familiar with the characters and the basic premise. All you really need to know about the series in general is that it's about a group of adventurers that go around taking jobs and killing goblins and other creatures. It's a really straightforward plot, and from the perspective of someone who isn't a fan, I think that the movie does a great job providing newcomers with everything they need to know. However, if you're already a fan of the series, then you might be disappointed and annoyed that the movie dedicates almost half an hour to recapping events from the series. I'd suggest that you skip to around the 25-minute mark if you already know about the series. I was actually surprised they spent so much time going over everything, and I appreciated it, but I do see the downside to it because overall there isn't much to the movie's story. Essentially, the movie's plot involves Goblin Slayer and his party taking on a job to rescue someone's daughter, who was an adventurer that went missing after setting off to kill some goblins with their own group of friends. I don't recall the girl that they rescued having a given name, and in fact, something that I noticed with all of the characters is that they aren't given actual names. Characters are referred to by their classes, which seem to be somewhat inspired by old school RPGs, and is probably done so that the viewer can imprint themselves onto one of the characters. The main characters include Goblin Slayer, Priestess, Lizard Priest, High Elf Archer, and Dwarf Shaman. The new female character, Noble Fencer, is the girl that they rescued from the goblins early on in the movie. Without giving too much away, Noble Fencer comes from a family with status, and her group was planning to starve out some goblins when their circumstances took a turn for the worse. Throughout the movie, this character is traumatized by what the goblins did to her and guilt-ridden by how she let down her party as their leader. I think her voice actress, whose name I won't even attempt to pronounce, did an excellent job expressing Noble Fencer's newfound anxiety and hatred for the goblins. She was one of the very few characters that I liked coming out of this movie, and I liked everything about her from her character design to her personality. However, the rest of the cast is really a mixed bag for me. Characters such as Goblin Slayer and the Priestess took a while to grow on me. I like how ruthless Goblin Slayer is, and I'm glad that Kagyu didn't make him an overpowered, untouchable killing machine. One of the earlier moments during the recaps shows that this man is indeed vulnerable, and I like that he seems to use his head to take on the goblins. For example, there's a scene early on where his group is clearing out goblins that took over a small town. He gives the archer an arrow with its tip modified to break off inside of the goblin to poison it and spread disease to its allies when it returns to them. Goblin Slayer is smart, steadfast, and relentless. It took some time, but I also started to like Brad Hawkins' voice for the character. Is it just me, or does he kind of sound like Batman when he's all armored up? I could hear the weariness and assurance that came from Goblin Slayer's past experiences dealing with goblins and Hawkins' performance. I don't really have much to say about the Priestess other than I thought the voice acting for the character was good. I do feel like Kagyu missed an opportunity to do something with her character and the Noble Fencer, as they both have suffered similar circumstances. What happened to the priest in the past and her inability to protect her former party members seems to be a big part of what shaped and motivates the character up until this point. Anyway, I didn't care for the Lizard Priest or the Dwarf Shaman. I really hated their voice acting and the way they speak. I didn't care much for their personalities either, but I think their voice acting and dialogue was more of an issue to me. The High Elf was my favorite character from Goblin Slayer's party. I really liked her personality. She is short-tempered, full of curiosity, and not afraid to speak her mind, as shown in the beginning of the movie when she questions Goblin Slayer's decision to allow the Noble Fencer to go with them. Additionally, it took me a while to warm up to the voice acting, but overall I really liked Mallory Roddick's performance as the character. Characters' voice acting aside, the story outside of the recap material is really thin. The remainder of the movie after the group rescues the noble fencer just consists of them killing the goblins that imprison people and consequently stopping the ritual they were planning to use her for. In regards to the action and animation, it was decent at best. From the perspective of an outsider, Goblin Slayer's main appeal seems to come from its excessive use of gore and unwavering brutality. The series always came across to me as being violent and bloody just for the sake of it. The amount of gore in this movie is almost absurd. I feel like Goblin Slayer could just pluck a goblin with his pinky and blood would just start spraying everywhere. It's not a huge problem for me as I knew what to expect going in, and I generally don't have a problem with gore in anime as long as it's used purposefully. Besides that, I don't think the CG blends in well with the 2D animation in multiple scenes. The 3D goblins stuck out to me in scenes where there were hordes of them. I also think that 3D was used in certain scenes for the Goblin Slayer when he's fighting hordes of the goblins, and it just stuck out. It doesn't look right. The animation itself seems fine. I didn't notice any choppiness or weirdly drawn frames. The animation is just okay. The effects used when characters cast spells were also fine, with the notable standout being the lightning spell that the noble fencer uses a couple of times. Quick side note, I like that there seems to be a limit on how many times they can use spells and miracles, so they just can't sit there and spam it. Overall, I think that Goblin Slayer Goblin's Crown was decent, but a good entry point for newcomers on the fence about the series. Longtime fans may have a problem with the pacing and the dense story due to the amount of time dedicated to getting new viewers up to speed, but I think there is still enough to enjoy here. I'm going to give Goblin's Crown a 6 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think about this movie. Like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. This has been Fear No Hate. I'm out of here. Peace.